What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actresses sits down for what should be a routine morning interview, only to find herself defending her entire career against questions she never saw coming? The tension in the Good Morning America studio became so thick you could cut it with a knife. And what started as a standard promotional appearance quickly spiraled into one of the most uncomfortable moments in morning television history. Before we get into what went down, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me which celebrity interview moment shocked you the most, because trust me, this one is going to blow your mind. Demi Moore walked onto the Good Morning America set with the poise and confidence of someone who had done thousands of interviews before. She settled into the chair across from Tracy Smith, exchanging pleasantries as the cameras rolled and the studio audience watched with anticipation. This was supposed to be about her new film, a passion project she had spent years developing. But Tracy Smith had other plans. Tracy leaned forward with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes and began. So Demi, let's talk about your career trajectory. You've been in this industry for decades now, and I think a lot of people are curious about how you've navigated the changing landscape of Hollywood, especially for women of a certain age. Demi's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a slight tightening around her eyes. Women of a certain age, she repeated slowly. That's an interesting way to phrase it, Tracy. I'd say I've navigated it the same way I've always navigated my career, by choosing projects that challenge me and resonate with audiences. Tracy nodded, but there was something pointed in her follow-up. Sure, but you have to admit that the roles have changed dramatically. I mean, when we look at your earlier work, films like Ghost and A Few Good Men, you were the leading lady, the romantic interest. Now you're taking on more, shall we say, mature roles. How does that feel? The studio went quiet. Even the crew members seemed to sense the shift in energy. Demi sat back in her chair, her jaw set. How does it feel? She said, not really asking. It feels like I'm doing exactly what I want to be doing. I don't measure my worth by whether I'm playing someone's love interest or not. I measure it by the depth of the character and the quality of the story. Tracy pressed on, undeterred. But surely you must have some feelings about the fact that Hollywood tends to, let's be honest, discard women once they reach a certain point. Your male contemporaries, they're still getting leading roles opposite women half their age. Does that bother you? Demi's composure began to crack just slightly. You're making a lot of assumptions about what bothers me, Tracy. What bothers me is sitting here and being asked to validate a narrative that I don't subscribe to. I'm not a victim of Hollywood agism. I'm an actress who's been fortunate enough to have a long and varied career. Tracy smiled again, that same tight smile. I'm not trying to paint you as a victim, Demi. I'm just asking honest questions that I think a lot of women watching at home can relate to. They see someone like you who was at the absolute peak of Hollywood glamour, and now you're doing these smaller independent films. It's a valid observation. Smaller films, Demi said, her voice taking on an edge. You say that like it's a step down. Some of the best work being done in cinema right now is an independent film. I'm proud of the projects I choose. I'm proud of the risks I take, and frankly, I find it reductive to measure success purely by budget size or box office numbers. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This was not the light, breezy interview they'd expected to watch with their morning coffee. Tracy, sensing she'd hit a nerve, decided to dig deeper. Let's talk about your personal life for a moment, Tracy said, switching gears. You've been very open about your struggles, your marriages, your journey with sobriety. Do you ever worry that being so public about these challenges has impacted how casting directors see you? That maybe you've become more known for your personal drama than your professional accomplishments? Demi's face flushed. Excuse me, are you seriously asking me if my openness about my struggles has hurt my career? Do you ask your male guests if their divorces have impacted their casting opportunities? Tracy held up her hands in a gesture of false innocence. I'm just asking what I think viewers want to know. You wrote a memoir where you shared incredibly intimate details about your life. You opened that door, Demi. I opened a door to honest conversation about the things many people struggle with. Demi shot back, her voice rising slightly. I didn't open a door for you to suggest that my personal growth and vulnerability have somehow diminished my professional value. Those are two completely separate things. Are they, though? Tracy countered, leaning in. Because in Hollywood, image is everything, and your image has certainly evolved over the years. Some might say you've gone from America's sweetheart to someone who's more associated with tabloid headlines than critically acclaimed performances. The color drained from Demi's face, then returned in a flush of anger. Some might say, she repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. Who exactly is saying that, Tracy? Because it sounds to me like you're hiding your own opinions behind this imaginary group of critics. Tracy shrugged, maintaining her interviewer composure. I'm simply reflecting what's out there in the cultural conversation. Social media, entertainment journalism, public perception. These things matter in your line of work. What matters in my line of work, Demi said, each word deliberate, is the craft. What matters is showing up prepared, doing the emotional work, serving the story. What doesn't matter is pandering to some arbitrary standard of what a woman in Hollywood should be at any given age or stage of her life. But don't you think, Tracy continued, seemingly oblivious to or unconcerned with Demi's rising frustration, that part of being a public figure is accepting that people will have opinions, that they'll compare you to your younger self or to other actresses? Of course people will have opinions, Demi said. But there's a difference between public opinion and a journalist sitting across from me on a major morning show essentially telling me that my best days are behind me and that I'm only relevant now because of my personal struggles. That's not journalism, Tracy. That's cruelty disguised as curiosity. The studio fell into an uncomfortable silence. Even the camera operators seemed frozen, unsure whether to keep rolling or cut away. Tracy's expression hardened, the pretense of friendly conversation evaporating completely. I'm not being cruel, Demi, Tracy said, her voice taking on a defensive edge. I'm doing my job. Part of that job is asking the questions that might make people uncomfortable. If you can't handle that, maybe you shouldn't be doing press tours. Demi let out a short, bitter laugh. If I can't handle it, I've been handling uncomfortable questions my entire career. What I can't handle, and what I won't accept, is being ambushed on a morning show under the guise of promoting a film I care deeply about. You haven't asked me a single question about the actual project I'm here to discuss. Tracy flipped through her notes with exaggerated casualness. Well, we're getting to that. But I think our viewers deserve the full picture of who Demi Moore is today. Not just the polished movie star selling a film, but the real person behind the headlines. The real person, Demi said slowly, is sitting right in front of you, telling you directly how your line of questioning is reductive and disrespectful. But you're not listening. You're too invested in whatever narrative you walked in here planning to create. Tracy's smile had vanished entirely now. You know what I think, Demi? I think you're deflecting. I think you came here expecting softball questions and a platform to promote your movie. And now that someone's actually challenging you to reflect on your choices and your place in the industry, you're trying to make me the villain. Challenging me? Demi repeated, shaking her head. Is that what you call this? Because from where I'm sitting, you've spent the last several minutes telling me I'm past my prime, that my personal life has overshadowed my work, and that I should just accept being pushed to the margins. That's not a challenge, Tracy. That's a character assassination. That's not what I said, Tracy protested. But there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes now, as if she was realizing this had gone further than she'd intended. It's exactly what you said, Demi fired back. Maybe not in those exact words, but that's been the subtext of every single question you've asked. You've been trying to get me to admit that I'm washed up, that I'm irrelevant, that I'm desperately clinging to a career that doesn't want me anymore. And I'm not going to do that because it's not true. Tracy straightened in her chair, her professional mask slipping back into place. I think you're being overly sensitive. These are standard questions that we ask all celebrities who've had long careers in the public eye. Really? Demi said, her tone sharp. Show me one interview where you've asked a male actor if his divorce made him less castable. Show me one where you've suggested that an actor like Tom Cruise or Brad Pitt is doing smaller films because Hollywood has discarded them. I'll wait. That's not a fair comparison, Tracy started. But Demi cut her off. Why isn't it fair? Because they're men? Because they're allowed to age and evolve and be seen as distinguished while women are seen as diminished? That's exactly my point, Tracy. You're perpetuating the very system you're pretending to examine. The producers in the control room were likely panicking at this point, but the cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of this increasingly hostile exchange. Tracy took a deep breath, clearly trying to regain control of the interview. Look, Demi, I understand that you're upset, but let's try to have a productive conversation here. You have to admit that the entertainment industry has certain realities when it comes to aging, especially for women. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying it exists. And as someone who's lived through it, don't you think you have a responsibility to acknowledge that? A responsibility? Demi said flatly. I have a responsibility to acknowledge a system that's tried to limit me my entire career? No, Tracy. What I have is a responsibility to myself, to my craft, and to the younger women coming up behind me to show them that they don't have to accept those limitations, that they can define success on their own terms. But you can't deny that things have changed for you, Tracy persisted. You're not getting the same caliber of roles you once did. You're not commanding the same salaries. These are objective facts. Objective facts, Demi repeated, her voice dripping with sarcasm. And how exactly do you know what roles I'm being offered or what I'm being paid? Have you seen my contract negotiations? Have you been in the room when I'm reading scripts? Or are you just making assumptions based on what you think my career should look like? Tracy faltered slightly. I'm basing it on publicly available information, box office numbers, the types of projects you've been attached to in recent years. So, you're judging my entire career and my value as an artist based on incomplete information and your own biases about what constitutes success, Demi said. That's incredibly irresponsible journalism, Tracy. The tension in the studio was palpable now. Audience members exchanged glances, unsure how to react. Some looked sympathetic to Demi. Others seemed to think she was overreacting. Tracy's face had gone red, a mixture of embarrassment and indignation. I've been doing this job for over 20 years, Tracy said, her voice tight. I know how to conduct an interview. And I know when a subject is being evasive and defensive instead of engaging in honest dialogue. Honest dialogue, Demi said, laughing without humor. You want honest dialogue? Fine. Here's some honesty for you. This entire interview has been designed to make me look desperate, washed up, and bitter. You came in here with an agenda. And when I didn't play along, when I didn't give you the sad, reflective quotes you were fishing for, you got frustrated. So now you're trying to paint me as difficult, as someone who can't take criticism or honest questions. But the reality is your questions weren't honest. They were loaded with assumptions and judgment. That's your interpretation, Tracy shot back. Other people watching this might see it very differently. They might see someone who's gotten so used to being treated with kid gloves that any real scrutiny feels like an attack. Demi leaned forward, her eyes blazing. Real scrutiny would be asking me about my process, about the themes in my new film, about the directors I want to work with, about the stories I want to tell. Real scrutiny would be engaging with me as the artist I am today, not constantly comparing me to who I was 30 years ago. What you're doing isn't scrutiny. It's nostalgia dressed up as journalism, and it's lazy. Tracy's mouth opened and closed, momentarily at a loss for words. Then she regrouped, her voice becoming clipped and professional. Well, I think our viewers can decide for themselves who's being unreasonable here. Let's try to get back on track. Your new film, which you've mentioned several times now. Tell us about it. Demi stared at Tracy for a long moment, her expression unreadable. The shift in Tracy's tone was obvious, a transparent attempt to salvage what was quickly becoming a disaster of an interview. But something in Demi's demeanor had changed. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but now it was mixed with something else. Resolve. You know what, Tracy? I'm not sure I want to talk about my film anymore, Demi said quietly. Not here. Not like this. Because anything I say now is going to be overshadowed by what just happened. You've already set the tone for this conversation, and I don't trust that you're suddenly interested in having a genuine discussion about my work. Tracy's eyes widened slightly. Demi, come on. Don't be dramatic. We can move forward. This is live television. We have a segment to complete. Dramatic, Demi repeated, a sad smile crossing her face. Of course, a woman standing up for herself is dramatic. A woman refusing to be diminished is difficult. These are the same tired tropes you've been pushing this entire interview, just repackaged. I'm not pushing any tropes, Tracy insisted, her voice rising in frustration. I'm trying to have an adult conversation with you, but you keep turning this into some kind of feminist statement. Not everything is about gender politics, Demi. Demi's laugh was sharp and humorless. Not everything is about gender politics? Tracy, this entire interview has been about gender politics. Every question you've asked has been filtered through the lens of what a woman my age should or shouldn't be doing, should or shouldn't accept. You just don't want to acknowledge it, because then you'd have to examine your own role in perpetuating these ideas. The control room must have been in absolute chaos at this point, but the cameras continued to capture every second. Tracy glanced briefly toward the crew, as if seeking some kind of support or guidance, but found none. She was on her own. I think you're projecting, Tracy said, her voice taking on a condescending edge. I think you came here with your own insecurities about aging and relevance. And instead of dealing with them honestly, you're attacking me for asking legitimate questions. Demi's composure cracked completely. Projecting? You think I'm projecting? Tracy, you've spent the last 15 minutes telling me in various ways that I'm not what I used to be, that I'm doing smaller work, that my personal life has damaged my career, that I should just accept being pushed aside. And when I push back, you call it projection. That's gaslighting, and it's beneath you. It's not gaslighting to point out that you're being defensive, Tracy countered. But her voice lacked conviction now. She knew she was losing control of the situation entirely. I'm not being defensive. I'm being honest, Demi said, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. There's a difference. Being defensive would be making excuses or trying to convince you that I'm still the ingenue from Ghost. I'm not doing that. I'm telling you that I've evolved, that my career has evolved, and that I'm proud of where I am. But you can't seem to accept that narrative because it doesn't fit the story you want to tell. And what story is that? Tracy asked, crossing her arms. The story of the fallen star, Demi said simply. The cautionary tale. The woman who had it all and lost it. That's what you wanted from me today, isn't it? Some reflective, melancholy acknowledgement that my best days are behind me. Maybe a few tears. A vulnerable moment that would make good television. But I'm not going to give you that because it's not my truth. Tracy shook her head, frustration evident in every line of her body. You know what, Demi? Maybe you're right. Maybe I did come in here with certain expectations. But that doesn't mean my questions weren't valid. It doesn't mean that the observations I made about your career trajectory aren't worth discussing. They would be worth discussing if they were coming from a place of genuine curiosity and respect, Demi responded. But they weren't. They were coming from a place of judgment. And there's a huge difference between asking someone to reflect on their journey and telling them their journey hasn't been good enough. I never said it wasn't good enough, Tracy protested weakly. You didn't have to say it explicitly, Demi said. It was in every question, every follow-up, every skeptical look. You measured my worth against an impossible standard, one that's designed to make women feel like they're always falling short. And I'm tired of it, Tracy. I'm tired of women in this industry being held to standards that our male colleagues never have to meet. Tracy took a deep breath, clearly trying to reset. Look, we obviously have very different perspectives on how this interview has gone, but we're running out of time here, and I think our viewers deserve to hear about your actual project. Can we please just talk about the film? Demi looked at her for a long moment, weighing her options. When she spoke, her voice was calm but final. No, Tracy, I don't think we can. Because you've made it very clear that you're not interested in the film. You're interested in dissecting my life and my choices and holding them up as some kind of cautionary tale, and I'm not going to sit here and participate in that anymore. So, what are you saying? Tracy asked, a note of panic creeping into her voice. You're just going to walk out? I'm saying that this interview is over, Demi replied, already beginning to remove her microphone. I came here in good faith to talk about a project I'm passionate about, and instead I've been subjected to what amounts to a character interrogation. I don't need this, and frankly, your viewers deserve better than watching someone get torn down on live television. Tracy's face cycled through several emotions at once. Shock, anger, embarrassment, desperation. Demi, please be reasonable. We can fix this. We can refocus. There's nothing to fix, Demi said, standing up from her chair. The damage is done. You showed exactly who you are and what you think of me. And I showed exactly who I am and what I'm willing to tolerate, which is not this. The studio audience sat in stunned silence, unsure whether to applaud or remain quiet. Tracy looked toward the cameras, then back at Demi, clearly trying to figure out how to salvage the situation. If you walk out right now, you're going to look like the bad guy, Tracy said. A last-ditch attempt to keep Demi in her seat. People are going to say you couldn't handle tough questions. Let them say it, Demi responded, her voice strong and clear. I'd rather be called difficult than sit here and validate the idea that women should just smile and accept being disrespected. I've spent too many years learning to value myself, to throw that away for the sake of appearing agreeable on morning television. Tracy opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Demi finished removing her microphone and set it carefully on the chair. She looked directly into the camera, as if addressing the viewers at home. To anyone watching who's ever felt like they had to shrink themselves to fit someone else's narrative, you don't, Demi said. You get to define your own success, your own worth, your own story. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And with that, Demi Moore turned and walked off the Good Morning America set, leaving Tracy Smith sitting alone in stunned silence, the cameras still rolling. Tracy sat frozen in her chair for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few seconds. The weight of what had just happened seemed to settle over the studio like a heavy blanket. She could hear the muffled voices of producers in her earpiece, frantic instructions about how to proceed, but none of it seemed to register. She looked at the empty chair across from her, then at the camera, then back at the chair. Well, Tracy finally said, her voice strained as she tried to compose herself. That was certainly unexpected. I think we all just witnessed a very real moment of. She paused, searching for words. A very real disagreement about the nature of this conversation. One of the crew members made a gesture from off-camera, likely signaling her to wrap up the segment or go to commercial. But Tracy seemed determined to have the last word. She cleared her throat and continued addressing the camera directly. You know, I want to say something to our viewers at home, Tracy began, her professional composure slowly returning. What you just saw was an interview that went in a direction neither of us expected. I came here today to have what I thought would be a frank, honest conversation with Demi Moore about her career, her life, and her new project. I believe in asking real questions, not just serving up softballs for celebrities to hit out of the park. She shifted in her seat, gaining confidence as she spoke. As journalists, we have a responsibility to dig deeper, to ask the questions that might make people uncomfortable, because that's where the truth lives. And sometimes those questions aren't received well. Sometimes people who are used to being in control of their narrative don't appreciate being challenged. The irony of her words seemed lost on her as she continued. I stand by every question I asked today. Were some of them tough? Yes. Were some of them direct? Absolutely. But that's journalism. That's what separates a real interview from a promotional appearance. And I think if viewers go back and watch this conversation, they'll see that I was respectful. I was professional, and I was doing my job. Tracy glanced down at her notes, then back up at the camera. Now, I certainly didn't expect Demi to walk out. I think that was an unfortunate choice on her part, because we really did want to hear about her film. We wanted to give her that platform, but she decided that she'd rather make a statement by leaving than by engaging in difficult dialogue. She leaned forward slightly, her expression earnest. And look, I get it. I understand that conversations about aging in Hollywood, about career changes, about public perception, these can be sensitive topics. But they're also important topics. They're topics that our viewers care about, that they relate to, and I think we do a disservice to everyone when we pretend that these realities don't exist. The producer's voice must have been screaming in her ear at this point, but Tracy seemed committed to finishing her thought. I want to be clear, I have tremendous respect for Demi Moore as an actress. She's had an incredible career. She's broken barriers. She's taken risks. And I came into this interview with the intention of exploring all of that. If she felt attacked, that was never my intention. But I also can't control how someone chooses to interpret questions that are meant to spark meaningful conversation. Tracy straightened her papers, a gesture that seemed more about maintaining composure than any actual need to organize her notes. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll have a very different kind of interview with a local chef who's revolutionizing farm-to-table dining. Stay with us. The cameras cut away, but not before capturing the look of barely contained frustration on Tracy's face. As soon as they were off air, she yanked out her earpiece and stood up abruptly from her chair. The studio audience began to murmur among themselves, some clearly on Demi's side, others seemingly sympathetic to Tracy's position. But the damage was done. In the age of social media, the interview was already being clipped, shared, and analyzed across every platform imaginable. Within minutes, hashtags were trending. Some people praised Demi for standing her ground and refusing to participate in what they saw as a disrespectful interview. Others criticized her for being unable to handle tough questions and accused her of being overly sensitive. The debate raged online with think pieces being written in real time about everything from agism in Hollywood to the responsibilities of journalists to the nature of celebrity interviews in the modern era. Everyone had an opinion about who was right and who was wrong, about whether Tracy had crossed a line or whether Demi had overreacted. But beyond all the noise and the hot takes and the divided opinions, what remained was the raw, unfiltered moment that had played out on live television. Two women, each firmly believing they were in the right, unable or unwilling to find common ground. It was uncomfortable to watch, yes, but it was also undeniably real in a way that morning television rarely is. The questions Tracy raised, whether delivered tactfully or not, touched on issues that countless women in entertainment and beyond grapple with every day. The frustration Demi expressed resonated with anyone who's ever felt reduced to their age, their past, their perceived decline rather than being seen for who they are in the present moment. And perhaps that's why the interview, as disastrous as it was, struck such a chord. It wasn't scripted. It wasn't polished. It was two people having a genuinely heated disagreement about things that matter, about how we value women, how we measure success, how we conduct conversations about difficult topics, and whether there's a difference between asking hard questions and making someone feel diminished. Tracy Smith would go on to defend her interviewing style in the days that followed, insisting that she had done nothing wrong and that the public reaction was overblown. Some of her colleagues in journalism supported her, arguing that celebrities needed to be prepared for all kinds of questions, not just the ones that made them comfortable. Demi Moore, for her part, would eventually address the incident in her own way, standing by her decision to walk out and reiterating that she would not apologize for refusing to participate in what she felt was a disrespectful conversation. Her supporters rallied behind her, seeing her walk out as a powerful statement about setting boundaries and refusing to accept treatment that feels demeaning. The Good Morning America incident became a case study in communication, in gender dynamics, in the power structures of media and celebrity. It sparked important conversations about how we talk to and about women, especially women who've been in the public eye for decades. It raised questions about the line between journalism and judgment, between curiosity and cruelty. And while people may never agree on who was right in that exchange, on whether Tracy's questions were fair, or whether Demi's reaction was justified, one thing became crystal clear. Both women felt strongly about their positions. Strongly enough to let the interview implode on live television rather than back down from what they believed. In the end, the interview that was supposed to be about a new film became about something much bigger and much more complicated. It became about respect, about value, about voice, and about the courage it takes to stand up and say, "No, this isn't okay," even when the cameras are rolling and the whole world is watching. So, what do you think about what went down between Demi Moore and Tracy Smith? Make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. Was Tracy out of line with her questions, or did Demi overreact to standard interview tactics? I want to hear your take on this whole situation.